Okay, welcome back to the Munn Avenue Muse podcast and videocast brought to you by Munn, M-U-N-N, AvenuePress.com. We publish books in fiction, nonfiction. We worked with 40 authors in 6 countries last year, and this podcast is really both for authors and avid readers. And I'm so delighted to have a good friend and co-conspirator of mine, Rachel Thompson, join us today to talk about social media, book marketing, and a little bit of personal stuff that's led to her writing multiple books as well. Rachel's the author of 8 books. Broken People just released, or was released in 2021, Broken Places, Journey Book Award for Narrative Nonfiction, first in category winner, and a 5-star reader favorite winner. Multi-award winning and best-selling Broken Pieces, the multi-award winning BadRedhead Media 30-day book marketing challenge, and BadRedhead Media SEO guide for authors, as well as 2 additional humor books, A Walk in the Snark, and Mancode Exposed. She's also currently finishing up the next BadRedhead Media book, the 30-day Twitter challenge, and several other guides for writers. Rachel founded BadRedhead Media in 2011, creating effective social media and book marketing campaigns for authors. Her articles appear regularly in the Huffington Post, Indie Reader, Feminine Collective, Book Machine, Bookworks, and is a popular writer on several top publications on Medium. Not just an advocate for sexual abuse survivors, Rachel is the creator and founder of the blog sharing hashtag phenomenon, hashtag Monday Blogs, and the weekly live Twitter space, hashtag Sex Abuse Chat, Tuesdays, 11 a.m. PST, and hashtag Book Marketing Chat, Wednesdays, 11 a.m. PST, to help writers learn how to market their work. Rachel, it's so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here talking with you.
and I have to say that when I say co-conspirator, what I'm referring to is when I was writing my first book and knew next to zero about book marketing, Rachel helped me out promote my first book, and the rest is kind of history. And Rachel was quite early, I think, in kind of getting social media. I would call her the social media whisperer, and because she's so good at it. You are, as a social media expert specializing in book media, we talked about you've written 4 books, and you're also, as a survivor of sexual abuse, you've written several books about coming through that awful experience and help form support groups to help others. So that's a lot. But first, maybe you can share a little bit about how you came through that dark time and came to write Broken Pieces and Broken Places and the other books.
Sure. Well, the abuse started when I was 11. I was just obviously a small child. It was a next door neighbor father, and that happened. I ended up having to go to court and testify against him in 2 trials. One was a civil trial and one was a military trial, and he was court-martialed and got all of 18 months and then came back. And so I ended up having to continue to grow up next to him and then his family and his kids, and it was very difficult. There was a lot of bullying and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't really understand how it affected me as a person, as a human, as a woman, as a mother, until I had my own daughter at the age of 35 and went into just complete panic mode. How am I going to keep her safe? How am I going to prevent what happened to me to her? And so I started I've always been a journaler and a writer, and I had written the 2 humor books, but this just really felt like completely different to me. And I ended up just going through old journals and looking at some of the things that I had written throughout the many decades, which were obvious to me as an adult, much older and mature, that the abuse was affecting how I was. Perfectionism, for example, was one thing, constantly trying new things that may not be in my best interest, trying to project being this perfect person so that nobody would, subconsciously, so that nobody would really ever look at me and go, oh, for sure something happened with her, right? Because I felt like I had this, scarlet letter on my forehead. I didn't. But it led to writing the first book. And I think the first book on this topic, Broken Pieces, I presented in pieces. So it wasn't necessarily chronological order. It didn't go from A to B to C to D. And a lot of people either hated that or loved it. So I learned a lot from that first book. But it took me a long time to even get to that writing of that first book because I didn't know the format. I was curious, should I write memoir? Should I write poetry? Should I write essays? So I kind of just combined it all. And that's what the Broken series became.
Yeah. And you have gone on to aware of the group that you formed, a support group online.
Yes.
For people that have been through similar things. And it's always kind of staggering to me how much larger that group is than people think. I mean, people have been through similar experiences. Talk about that support group. When did you form that?
Well, that's an interesting question. So the first book came out, Broken Pieces, and so many people contacted me, whether that was through DMs or PMs or email or whatever, even text messages from people that I hadn't seen since high school who were saying, yeah, that happened to me too. I felt so alone. Do you have any suggestions of where to connect with other survivors? And of course, there's wonderful charities out there, like RAINN is one, RAINN. The Joyful Heart Foundation is another great one. I do fundraising for both of those. But what I found was people were very concerned about speaking about this publicly, because we talked about it, for example, on a public facing Facebook page, people's families would come in and make comments. So I knew even before I started the group, started a Facebook group first, and there's about 100 people in there. I would say 98% are women. And then I started doing sex abuse chat because I really felt like we needed a place to talk about this as survivors with other survivors. So it wasn't in any way trying to say, hey, hire me as your therapist. I'm not a therapist. I'm a survivor too. Let's talk about what it takes to thrive. But also let's talk about the difficult stuff that goes along with being a survivor. Mental health issues, PTSD, even physical chronic pain is very, very common in people who have experienced childhood sexual abuse. So it was really great to form communities. For me, Twitter worked great because we could form DM groups. And then also I have groups on Facebook that you can only find if you connect with me and I invite you in. So it doesn't even show up in the groups overall because for me, it's important to keep the spaces very safe because there are a lot of really not great people who want to invade those spaces.
Sure.
And especially it being it's not women only. I don't require that it be women, but it is important that we don't end up with, guys in there who may not be there as survivors. They may be there as, something else. And that exists, unfortunately.
So if someone is interested in and has had these experiences, they could probably contact you at BadRedheadMedia.com, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And also at that website, you can learn a whole lot about Rachel does otherwise. So, kudos to you, not only for surviving, but reaching out to others and helping them
Thank you.
deal with these lifelong issues. And I have more personal knowledge about this than I care to talk about right now, but it's a wonderful group.
Thank you.
For sure. So let's talk about social media. How did you get started with that in the first place? There's a lot of people that might be listening today that, they don't know much about it. They don't. And then if they write a book, then it's like, okay, I better figure out what the heck's going on. Talk a little bit about your evolution with social media.
Sure. Well, I resisted Facebook for a long time. And then my niece, who is now in her 40s, said, oh, it's not so bad. We can connect as a family, yada, yada. She was probably in her early 20s at this point. So we're talking like 20 years later. And I didn't love it, but I figured, I'll give it a try. And then Twitter had started in 2005. I joined in 2009. Upon my niece saying, hey, Facebook's for all the old fuddy-duddies, let's go over to Twitter, it's the new thing, right? And at this point, the only thing that had existed really was LinkedIn. Prior to that, Twitter was very new. Facebook, of course, started in the early 2000s, and YouTube. So I ended up going to Twitter, and I literally just watched for a good month because it was a completely new language and culture that I didn't really understand. And at the time, you only had 140 characters,
right.
Then it doubled to 280. Now you can do 10,000 words in a tweet if you want, whatever. Everything has changed so much. But what I loved about Twitter was the immediacy of connecting with people. And that's how I ended up forming and doing Sex Abuse Chat. And I'm still friends with some of those people from back in 2009, 2010, when I started this whole thing. So it's kind of amazing. I've met several people in real life. You and I have worked together for, at this point, almost 10 years, maybe.
Almost 10 years, yeah.
Yeah. So it's great now for authors, I think, to understand that social media is not just about sharing what you had for lunch, right? That was the big joke initially. People do that. My mom we're doing a cookbook for my mom. So I share a lot of pictures of the food that she makes because I'm a terrible cook. So I'm thrilled to share her beautiful shots,
Oh, so I'm excited about working with you on that cookbook.
Yeah.
Those recipes are quite fantastic. So.
Oh, she's amazing. I'm super excited. But anyway, to go back to social media, I think what drew me to it was ebooks were just starting. It was a digital revolution, basically. Things were so new. People didn't know that you didn't have to buy a Kindle, for example, to read an ebook. A lot of people still think, oh, I don't have a Kindle, so I can't read that. And I tell them they have free apps. So a lot of that process was about educating people on how social media worked. And then as it grew to be the place that people were talking about books, then publishers got interested and agents got interested. And so now if for example, you're trying to get into a big 5 publisher or find an agent, if you're not on social media, they're not even going to look at you. They're going to want to know not just numbers too. A lot of people play the numbers game. It's not just you have 100,000 followers. How many of those are real followers? How many do you interact with? And so having a strategy is probably the most important thing that I can recommend to people with social media. If it's just random thoughts off the top of your head, that's fine once in a while. But if your real goal is to get people to hire you or read your work or buy your product or your service, you need to be online in places that you will be seen for that demographic. So it's really important to be strategic about it.
The traditional publishers are absolutely looking for people with established platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as you say, that are, really involved with it. It's easy enough to tell. You just look at what they've been doing. Yeah, plus the numbers. And here, there's a little bit of a quandary here that I hear from authors that I would like to explore with you a little bit.
Sure.
As you know, One Avenue Press, we do Amazon ads,
Right.
and we're good at it.
You are.
And the with Amazon ads, you can tell, okay, they searched on this phrase, your ad came up, they clicked on the ad, they went to your book page, they bought the book. So you spent X on the ad, you got this sale. Now, you may spend on ads that don't turn into sales. That's sort of part of the mix. With social media, people think, well, oh, all of a sudden I'm going to be on social media and I'm going to get all these sales. But that's not the strategy, right? I mean, what is it that social media can do for an author?
Social media is about connecting with readers, building relationships with readers, and hoping at some point they're going to come where you've given them a call to action. Do you want them to come to your website? Do you want them to come to your Substack and sign up for your newsletter? Do you want them to go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble? So I think it's really important to have an idea of what is your goal? What is your purpose? So if people expect that if they get 10,000 Twitter followers, they're going to get 10,000 book sales. There's no way to ever put those two together, and the conversion rate is extremely low. It's less than 1% for Twitter. It's a little bit higher for Facebook and YouTube and Pinterest and those kinds of things. But I think you really have to have a goal in mind. If your goal, and have it be realistic. People come to me and ask me, can you guarantee book sales? And I say, I can't. There's no possible way that I can guarantee, because somebody saw a post on Facebook, they're going to give you that sale. Plus, I can't track. You can see from Amazon from the ads, but let's say you're not running ads and somebody's getting sales. Where are those sales coming from? We have no idea, because Amazon does not provide that information to us, nor does Barnes and Noble or any of the others. So I have a couple tricks up my sleeve. One of the tips that I give authors is to use this free service called Booklinker. It's they also own a higher priced version called Genius Links, which I also use. But anybody can use Booklinker. And the reason I say to do that is because you can share it on any social media, in your newsletter, on your blog, in an article, whatever, and it's going to show up for that person in their country. So if, for example, someone...
And you can track and you can get data, right?
Yes. So I know exactly where on social media the clicks are coming from, and also the destination, where are they going to. So that's some of the stuff that I do for clients. But people can do that on their own. If, they don't want to hire me, it's fine. They can use Booklinker. It's totally free.
And I think that the way to think about it is, it's not as if like Amazon ads is better than social media. No, it's part of the mix. As I like to say to authors, it's not like one thing you do is going to be a home run. It's 1,000 little things done well. And social media is one of those things. I mean, I look for instant gratification with ads, or we run these 5-day promotions that, give you an adrenaline rush because of all the downloads. But I also, my email list of readers for my author list is over 10,000. And what you want to do there, like social media, is as an author, you don't want to say, send out newsletters or make posts that say, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. No, I share short stories and personal stories in my email newsletter, and I'm usually asking for feedback. If I have a new book coming out, I'll show 2 covers and ask which one they like better. The email that I got one of the best responses to the subject line, and I write thrillers, which most of you know, but the subject line was, "Who wants to be murdered in my next book?"
Oh, that's awesome.
And you know what? I got hundreds of volunteers,
That's awesome.
and it was hilarious. And at first, I was offering just, I was going to pick one name and offer, the free copies of the book, signed copies, and so forth. But I had so many good names. I thought, well, why not use those names? So I created a spreadsheet of all these names. By the way, I've done this on the last two books, and I'll tell you the great names that won because they were really good. One was Tiffany Sly.
Ooh, that's a good name.
Wasn't that a good name? She became
really
an FBI agent in my third book. The book I'm working on now is Julie Sparks.
Oh, that's good.
But I used 28 of the other names in my books. And as authors, when you're looking for names for characters, why not make them real people? And from a satisfaction standpoint, of course, when the book came out, I emailed the 29 people and said, the book came out, here's your character. He's a general or she's a paramedic. And those people were just totally thrilled. And then as an author, it didn't hurt for some of them to say, well, I'm going to buy it for my father for Christmas. And
of course. Great marketing. Yeah.
And it wasn't really that my intention, but those kind of things are fun. They're engaging for people, and social media should be the same way. And then, yes, of course, if you have a new book come out, you're going to say, here's my new book, and buy the book. But those people, they know you by now. They've interacted with you, and of course, they want, assuming they enjoyed the previous book or whatever, they're going to buy them.
Yeah.
So that, that question is, it's part of an overall strategy. Social media is very important. I'd like to talk to you related to that, because I've only come to this like in the last 2 months, but I'm super impressed with Substack.
Oh my gosh. Same. Yes.
It's exceeded my expectations. I've only been there 2 months, and this podcast will be on Substack, but Substack also pushes it out to YouTube and Spotify and Apple, which is, most of the platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't start with the 10,000 readers. That's the readers. I started with a list of authors I've worked with over the last few years, and I thought, well, this is kind of a way to keep in touch. And then our mutual friend Steve had been on my case that's Steve Bennett at Author Bites, had been on my case to start a podcast, and here we are, right?
Yes.
And also Substack handles the podcast, handles the video cast, does all of that, and the newsletter. And I've heard from people that I hadn't been in contact with for a couple of years, and how great they love the podcast. And
that's great.
Oh, by the way, I have this book in mind that I've been working on, and can I talk to you about it? And great. And the other thing I like is Substack has this thing called Notes, which is kind of like a Twitter feed or an Instagram feed. I love that there's no advertising.
None.
And so I don't have all that junk to wade through. And it seems like the quality of the people that are there and responding to things is a much better, I don't know what you call it, but
less of a cesspool.
Yeah, more of a serious group with good ideas and things to share. And yeah, there's a little bit of self-promotion going on there, but hey, that's fun. And it's free. So
yeah, I just wrote an article and pushed it out this morning. So if you check your email, you probably got it. And thank you for the subscription, by the way. Comparing MailChimp or MailerLite or any of those other email platforms to Substack. And I started writing on Substack last August. I have a sponsor who pays for my advertising, which is Booklinker. I mentioned them. And again, it's free, so it's not like it's costing people money. I'm not making anything off of anything when somebody uses that service. And I have written weekly since August. I have never written anything weekly except for my blog. Now, my blog is suffering, but what I'm doing is I'm taking 3 or 4 or 5 articles and putting them in a summary on my website and saying, here's the first couple paragraphs of these. Click over to Substack if you want to read more. It's free to subscribe, yada, yada. So that's why some people will say, do I do a newsletter or a blog? I recommend doing both for 2 different reasons. Your blog will be indexed by Google the more you add fresh content. So if it's completely static and you never add anything fresh, then that's makes it more difficult for you to be found in search engines for those keywords or key phrases that we want to associate with you, which is your branding. So I think for that reason, plus again, it's free. If somebody pays for a subscription, they take their little percentage or whatever, and that's fine. They handle all that. And I have I think I started with about 2,100 or so subscribers that I really just hadn't done a lot with. And now I'm almost at 3,500 since August, and my open rates are higher than I ever got with MailChimp. And the views do come more from Substack itself because they do a lot of internal marketing that I think we're not even aware of, all the internal marketing that they do.
If they decide that they want to share something that you did, you're going to get a response. I mean, I've been on and off and experimenting with social media since I met you, 10 years or so ago. And I've never, up until recently, I never had a post that I would consider had gone viral. I would get a handful of responses, like the only one that I had gotten over 100 likes on had to do with Woodstock because I was there.
Wow.
So, and I had a great picture, but I posted on Substack a post last month that they decided to show to a bunch of people about my writing journey, and it's never too late to write a book. And that post had 1,200 likes.
Wow, that's great.
Had 57 comments and 20, they call it restack, but reposts. And it was great.
That's fantastic. I think, if I could just interject, I think the reason things went really well for a lot of people on Substack is because Musk took over Twitter and basically ruined it. No matter what you think, it's not as popular as it was, and people needed somewhere to go. And we tried Blue Sky, we tried Mastodon, we tried all these other Twitter copies, and nothing really seemed to be a good fit. And then journalists and writers discovered Substack. So it's a really wonderful place to read terrific writing, most of which is free.
And I know you helped out some authors that you and I work with together, but you've helped them out, establish them on Substack. I have an author who I had helped get onto MailChimp a few years ago. We're helping her with her 6th book now.
Wow.
And MailChimp's gotten expensive because her list has grown.
Yeah.
And I just helped her migrate it over to Substack last week, and it's fine.
It's great. And you can still do things like book sweeps, for example, is $50. You join a promo based on your genre. And then, I get a discount for my clients. And you get 300, 400, 500 emails of people who have opted in to receive your newsletter. So it doesn't matter if a lot of people, this seems to be the biggest block that I'm understanding. If someone says, well, I'm on MailChimp or MailerLite or whatever, I can't switch to Substack. And I'm like, why? All you have to do is import your list and you're done. And then you end your MailChimp conversation. People will still get your newsletter. And that's what I think they don't understand. They don't have to go to the app. They don't have to go to the site. they can read it in their inbox. But they can also go to Substack, and there's just this huge wealth of stuff to read and wonderful people. So I really like it as an option. So, and I don't think it's too difficult for people to maneuver. It's pretty user-friendly.
A little bit. Yeah, you have to get a little. I think that the trickiest part for me was to find where stuff was. Mm-hmm. You learn the navigation, but once you get there, actually creating a post or creating a note is just like Twitter and Instagram. Easy. And creating a post is very similar, or a newsletter is very similar to MailChimp and the MailerLite. I mean, the graphical interface, and it's in some ways better, in some ways it's missing a few things, but it's it's very cool. So I don't want to, spend too much time on that.
Sure.
But and I just want to make clear that neither Rachel nor I are sponsored by Substack.
No.
We're sharing this experience and maybe a recommendation, really, as friends and people that are constantly learning. I mean, I'm teaching some AI seminars, introduction to AI.
Ooh, that's
to
a good
local
idea.
libraries, and I always open it with, because it's changing so much. I said, well, what qualifies me to do this is that I know a little more than you do.
And that's a qualification.
And that may be true of publishing as well. I think I may know a little more than you do, and I can help you with that. So great. Now, you do something like a podcast. I was on your Twitter Spaces. What's that about?
So Twitter Spaces are like, they call it social audio. So Clubhouse was the first app to do audio-only spaces. I mean, there were other renditions of it earlier on, but that's what existed. And then over the pandemic, Twitter started Twitter Spaces, and I was grateful to be part of their beta. And I was able to test all the different features. And so what it is you have to have a Twitter account, or X as it's referred to now, and then you can just click a button and enter a space that's already happening, or you can schedule your own, or you can co-host with somebody. There's a lot of different ways to be involved in spaces, but I'm kind of like, do I want to incorporate that into my Substack? Because then people are listening to a replay, because I do record them. Not all people record their spaces. They just do them and then it's ended and then they go on to the next one. But I feel like, because I'm very organized about my spaces, it's a specific topic or it's a person. For example, I'm going to have Andrew D. Kaufman on. He's a PhD, used to be at UVA. We'll be talking about his book that's being made into a film. So we'll talk about that, what that process has been like. So I think it's really helpful to, if you commit yourself. And I have grown significantly in followers on both of my business account and my personal account over the last couple of years. Just doing spaces, people will start following you. So it's a lot of low-hanging fruit to connect with people who might have similar interests.
Yeah. And I mean, listening to you, it sounds like, and I hear this from authors too, like, whoa, I don't have time to do all that different stuff. And I think, and you would advise this, you pick your spot, you pick one or two things and you work with it. And I know you will post and create content for people, but also you teach people how to do it themselves too, right? You do both.
Yeah. In fact, that's really what led to me writing the 30-day book marketing challenge. I first released it in 2018. So at that point, I had been in publishing and had published at that point probably 5 or 6 books. This was a big one for me because I wanted authors to understand how to set up their Twitter, how to set up their Facebook, to figure out where their demographic was. Let's be strategic about it. If you're writing YA and romance, then you really need to be on Instagram and TikTok. If you're writing memoir, you probably want to be on Facebook and even maybe, of course, LinkedIn. I always say LinkedIn's important because business people read books too. A lot of people will eschew LinkedIn. I don't want to put my books over there, but books can do very well over there. So, I really encourage people to be strategic about where their ideal readership is. You don't know going into your first book. You kind of have to guess, but you can see what else is out there. For example, you could have looked on Amazon. You probably did. What are the #1 thrillers? What lists are they on? How are they marketing their work? All of this is public, so anyone can go look at that stuff. It's just a matter of when you get that information, what to do with it. And that can be very confusing for a lot of people. Which direction do I go? Do I do a newsletter? Do I do a book sweeps? Do I have to be on social media? I always tell people you don't have to do anything. You can do what works for you.
Right. And you'll know, because part of marketing, before I started writing my books, I spent 25 years in sales and marketing, and part of marketing is what I call inexpensive experiments.
Oh, I like that. Very true.
You try some things, and if one thing works, you do more of it.
Yeah.
If another thing works, it doesn't work, then you either stop doing it or you modify it and give it another try.
Right.
And then that way you incrementally grow your result.
It's like A/B testing, basically,
Sure, absolutely. So in a way, social media is the same. And then the other thing, which is true, is that things keep evolving and changing, and that there's the fruit of the moment, which might be TikTok, and then who knows, next year it might be banned in the U.S. So
I know.
You just don't know. And, I tried that out a little, and I thought, well, okay, this isn't going to work for me, but Substack is definitely good for me.
Yeah.
You are an author, a mother, a full-time social media consultant and expert, and a podcaster, and you run these Twitter Spaces and all of these different things. How do you manage it all? And write. How do you do this?
It's a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
No, and you have a daughter. Yeah,
I have a daughter and a son. I have an 18-year-old who was supposed to graduate from high school, but is now doing summer school. But we don't have to get into that. So I would say I delegate. I have wonderful people that work that are freelancers. So if like, for example, I have one client that loves TikTok, not getting a lot of sales from there, but I don't love filming stuff for them. So I have a gal that I hired, and she creates all of that for me and then puts it in draft, and then I approve it. I think you have to delegate certain things to certain people. Like I'm not a great graphics person, so I have a graphics person on staff. That's helpful for me when it comes to client stuff and all that kind of stuff. Because if I had to create all those visuals, I would never get any other work done. So I think the best way to answer this question is know what your strengths are, and be honest with your weaknesses. And then that's where you can say, I don't do this. I'm not good at this. Like for Amazon ads, go to Charlie, or you need a great website, go to Steve. Like, I don't do those things, but I know really great people that do.
Yeah, same with me. I mean, we're not doing social media. I send them to you. And,
and I appreciate that. Thank you.
And even at the beginning, even with my first book, I mean, when I made the decision to turn down 9 agents and publish the book myself, I said, wow, this book has got to look as good or more professional than the traditionally published book. And that means I am not a graphic artist. So I hired a graphic artist. I wanted the interior to look as good. There's an aesthetic experience. So, I had a designer do that. And, I hired an editor and a proofreader, and now Munn Avenue Press, we provide all those services
Sure.
to people. And, you go out and sell your book and do live events and, do the things that you are good at and write, of course. A lot of times people write their first book and they expect they're going to make $1 million. That's unlikely, very unlikely. So I encourage writers, especially ones that show, real signs of talent, work on the next book. Hire Rachel to do your social media, hire us to do your ads and promotions, and work on your next book. And then also some of our authors that work with you too are really good at doing things on their own. I mean, they participate in Facebook groups, they do live events, they email everybody they know, and those are all part of the 1,000 little things I mentioned that will help sell books. So like you and I were both working on a wonderful book called The Kid Grows in Brooklyn, which is humorous anecdotes. And
wonderful.
The author, Art Schulman, we actually done an interview with him, has done a lot on his own to promote his book. But at the same time, he knows, like, I need help with promoting it. I need help with social media. I need help to do these things. And for me, and I think it's true for you too, my number one criteria for taking on a new author is, can I help them be successful? If I can't help them be successful, I don't want to do it. Because I don't want to take their money. I want them to not waste their money, but also, I have a reputation for Munn Avenue Press of producing bestsellers and good authors. So, we're protecting both our interests, the author and ours, by either saying, okay, we'll take it on and we're going to bust our butts to make sure, everything works, or you need to do a little more work on the book before it's ready.
And I think I love that, because a lot of authors are afraid to work with an editor. They're afraid to let anybody see their work because they're brand new and they haven't, participated. They haven't gotten feedback from people. So I think it's important to start that process early on, and working with someone like you can walk them through that process. You shepherd them, is what it's called, a book shepherd. I think it's really important to have early eyes on our work, so that when we get to the point where the book is for sale and somebody leaves us a poor review, because it will happen. I have many 1-star reviews. I can tell you, it won't happen every time, but it's important that so many people's eyes have been on this work. And even then, we'll still find typos, and it just drives me insane. But you have to be, if you're going to self-publish or publish with an indie press, you still have to do all the same marketing you would have to do if you were with a big 5. I have clients that are with the big 5 who I do all their social media. I optimize all their blog posts and newsletters for them. I help them with giveaways, because their company, their publishing company, does not do any of that.
They don't do it anymore. I mean, that's been my argument in favor of, sure, this benefits to traditional publishing, and I don't want to say, absolutely you got to do one or the other, but it's changed. So unless you are James Patterson and Michelle Obama, they're not going to put a lot of marketing dollars behind your book. They expect you to have that social platform. They expect you to develop an email list and do those kinds of things. And they take the lion's share of the royalties. So one of the benefits of publishing with us is our authors keep 100% of the royalties. So
that's amazing.
And there's a big difference. It can be the difference between the traditional publisher making $1 or $1.50 a book, and with us making $6 to $7 a book.
Yeah, so, it's a big difference. Absolutely.
It's a big difference. So I actually diverted you, because one of the questions authors ask all the time, and writers, people you've met, is how do you manage How do you manage to get in the writing time with all of these other commitments you have? What's your secret?
Well, I think writing weekly on Substack has made me be more regular with regard to my newsletter writing, because I just was not at all. I was pretty good about blogging. And so like, I feel like if I'm going to put all that effort into my Substack and grow that, then I'm probably not going to be able to put as much effort into my blog, which is why I do summaries. But the other thing too is I think it's important to have either days or hours that you set aside. I was just talking with Chris earlier, your audio guy. I only work for maybe an hour on Saturdays, and the rest of that day, I take 2 to 3 hours to work on whatever my current project is. So I have a couple current projects. One, my next book is going to be about writing trauma, because there's so many of us they're afraid to write trauma, afraid of how it'll make us feel, and also about having the world know our intimate story. There's a lot of emotions to work through with that. So I'm working on that. And I'm also been asked to write some erotica, or what they call contemporary romance. And I'm about 4 chapters into that. So I think it's important to set aside the time. And it's something that I have fought my whole life. I mean, I've written 8 books. My son just turned 18. Mm-hmm. So I was able to write books with a screaming teenager. He wasn't really screaming. He was mostly in his room with the door closed, but I still had a teenager. I still had my daughter who's, in college as well. She's getting her grad degree. So it's not like things stop once your kids get older. It sort of changes. But,
right.
The fact that I was able to write all these books when my kids were younger, I feel very proud of that fact, because it was a lot of late nights and early mornings.
Sure.
For me.
Yeah, I mean, with me, I try and write at least for an hour in the morning early, before I get tied up in all the other things we're working on.
Smart.
So when I hear people say, well, I don't have the time, I think it's really a matter of we have to choose. We make priorities. If you really want to write a book, you make the time to do it. If you really want to play tennis or golf, you make the time to do it. So it's just like that, I mentioned on another episode, an author I ran into who's written 10 books, and she's a full-time attorney with 4 kids. So
amazing.
I like to ask this question about how people make the time, because I think it may encourage some of the listeners out there to think about how to make the time. And her answer was she gets up at 4 in the morning, and from 4 to 6, before the young kids get up, she gets in a couple hours of writing time. And that's the way a book gets done. It's not like you sit down and write a whole book at once. It's little pieces that add up over time. So if you can write a page a day in a year, you have a book, right?
Yeah. So if I can share, the way my mom wrote her book is on her iPhone. She literally put that whole book together, all her little stories, all the recipes.
She typed it in or whatever she did.
Yep, she just typed it. She's a good typist, but she's 83 now. Is that right? I think she was born in 1940. Okay, sorry, Mom. But she's older, and so it's harder for her to sit at the computer. So she sits in her comfy reclining chair, and she literally typed that book over the course of about 3 months and shared it with me in notes. We have iPhones, so she shared it with me in notes, and then I was able to take it, put it in a Word doc, and then send it over to my editor. So, it's never too late to start. And even if you write your book on your phone, at least it got done. Right. I'm so proud of her.
Yeah, and we work with many authors where they are retired, they have a story to tell. You mentioned trauma. We published one book, and she was on this podcast, Renata Merlino. The book is Empress, about her surviving those kinds of difficult things. And we're just starting working on another one today. And most of the authors don't expect like they're going to be number one on the New York Times bestseller list, but they have a message, they want to share it, and maybe it will help some people who read it. And it's a source of great satisfaction to me to help people like that fulfill their dream.
It's wonderful. It really is.
There's a young woman, very talented young woman who works for me named Lily. And she said to me 6 months ago or so, she says, you know what, we're in the business of helping fulfill people's dreams.
I love that.
And I said, you're absolutely right. I mean, for many people, writing and publishing a book is a bucket list item.
Yeah.
So why not? And my goal, in part, with this podcast is you're hearing the stories of many people from many walks of life with many different backgrounds, all of whom are writing and producing books. And if they can do it, you can do it.
Exactly.
That's a message.
Yeah.
And you don't need me, you don't need Rachel to do it. But if you need help and want to, be successful with it, we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Rachel, thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom and your backstory, which I think is an inspiration.
Thank you.
And Rachel's books, she's mentioned the Book Marketing Challenge and Broken Pieces and Broken Places. They are all available on Amazon.com. Mm-hmm. You can search for Rachel Thompson, Thompson, and her books will come up. And I highly recommend them to you. And we are the MUNN, MUNN, AvenuePress.com. And if you have an interest or need help publishing your book, marketing your book, we do audio books and we even produce podcasts just like this. Feel free to reach out at MUNNAvenuePress.com. So thank you again, Rachel.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here with you, Charlie.